What's going on, everybody? My name is Lil Wooly, and today I want to discuss what went wrong with Infinite Warfare and Modern Warfare Remastered. We kind of do a video like this almost every year. I think last year is like the only exception to it because I kind of got away from the YouTube game. But almost every year, we kind of go over the past year of Call of Duty, and we just talk about the game, or in this case, games in general. But this video, I kind of want to break it down to what went wrong, what were the problems with these games, because overall, this year was really not that good of a Call of Duty year for me, and I know a lot of people basically kind of left the Call of Duty series for this year because of the games and just some of the stuff that happened during this year in the world of the Call of Duty universe or whatever. But yeah, I want to discuss the problems with IW and MWR, and also look ahead into the future of COD, not in particular with this year's coming release that's going to happen in 2 weeks, but more along the lines of Infinity Ward's future as a Call of Duty developer, if the future holds that for them. So let's go ahead and let's just jump into Infinite Warfare. And just as a funny tidbit, I kind of took a look at my Elgato software for when the last recordings I did of this game was. The last recording of IW that I have was recorded on December 19th of 2016. Now, I know I've probably, streamed the game. I may have even tried to do some recordings since then, but the last good recording I have is from December. And that's kind of bad. Let's just put it that way. A couple months into the game and you're just done with it. I mean, that's terrible. That is just absolutely terrible, especially for someone who, really enjoys the Call of Duty series. But this year was just different, and there were several problems with IW that really contributed to that. The first big problem was futuristic fatigue, as I like to call it. This was the third year where we had jetpacks and advanced movement and all this futuristic stuff in the game, and people were getting tired of that concept, and you lost a lot of the OG players. You lost a lot of the older guys that played this game, and particularly the YouTubers who probably could have pushed the game for you, left the game. I know the biggest example I can think of is Drifter. Basically, after a few weeks of the game, he stopped making videos of IW and focused more on MWR, Overwatch, and a couple other games and a couple other things in particular. So you had these YouTubers who left the new game and just didn't really talk about it, didn't play it, didn't really do anything with it. And that kind of caused a major problem in the player base, and just overall just showed how the futuristic style of Call of Duty just kind of overstayed its welcome. Problem number two that we had here was the weapon design. This was, I believe, the first Call of Duty to actually have more energy style weapons, that have more what people considered Halo style weapons, and a lot of people immediately made a comparison to a lot of these weapons as if, oh, they took this from Halo, or they took this from this game or that game that had a similar concept to Halo. And a lot of people were really turned off by it. I know I was. And, you would think these guns would be like super powerful, and they just never really were that powerful, which kind of upset some people as well. And also, with the weapon design, they had multiple weapon variants. The variants were, it was kind of confusing to figure out what the difference was with these variances. Some of them you could get to nuke with, some of them, better headshot multiplier, some of them just did more damage, some of them had a larger magazine. There was, you could break it down, but there were so many of them that it became an unbearable grind to try to get all the weapon variants out there, or even just to get the one that you wanted to get and try out. It just became a tough grind to deal with, and I think a lot of people just didn't like that idea. So, and this is also, just like, we had variants in Advanced Warfare, and I think a lot of people were kind of upset by that. So I think that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths as well. Problem number three, the supply drops. Obviously, they're going to be here to stay in the Call of Duty world, but supply drops are always something that people get upset about. With these supply drops, they had weapons in them pretty early on, whether it be variants or new weapons in particular, whether it be different melee weapons. The camos and all the other stuff was just not that interesting. And then obviously there's the whole money grab with COD points and buying supply drops with real life currency. And you could just get into that, you know, whole spiel, and that could be a totally separate video on its own. And we could probably pull other games that have a similar mechanic into it. But the supply drops always a problem in these games and have been for the past few years. And again, another thing that turns off the Call of Duty audience. And then the last problem I want to talk about with IW is it seemed like it was a lazy, or as I put in my notes, almost a poor man's version of Black Ops 3. And I say that because it just did not feel inspired. It was just less interesting to Black Ops 3. Black Ops 3, you had these characters and you almost had a story behind the characters and their specialties. The camos were unique. The you know, just overall the feel of the game was really, really good in Black Ops 3. This game was, it could have just kind of copy and paste a little bit and just did subtle improvements, but even then it just like, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel great. It was just, almost seemed like they were just kind of being lazy with it and just didn't put any heart into the game. And if you don't put heart in the game as a developer, your players are going to feel that, and I think a lot of us did, and I think that a lot of us stopped playing because of it. So that's kind of my big issues that are with IW. Now, if we move on to Modern Warfare Remastered, Modern Warfare Remastered did not have that many problems. I think that's probably because it had a good base to start off with. First of all, it was just, you know, mostly graphics updates, but there were a couple of issues with the game, and just as another tidbit, like I did with IW, the last recording I have is from March 19th, but same principle applies. I'm pretty sure I streamed it. I'm pretty sure I recorded and played the game since then, but the last recording I have is from March 19th. So another little tidbit, you know, I got done with the game in March for the most part, so it's like, yeah, that's okay, but we were talking about someone who played COD for pretty much the entire year, not only playing until March. That's kind of sad, to be honest. But anyway, let's get into some of the problems. Problem number one, and a lot of these are nitpicky, and most of these don't even have to do with the game. They have to do with developers' decisions and what probably was more likely Activision stepping in. But the first problem was it was not 100% like the original. It was pretty much advertised as this was just going to be a graphical update to the game, and you were just going to get the game as it was back then. But there was some subtle differences. I know a lot of the OG players complained about how the heads-up display was a little bit different from the original game, as well as there was a couple of hidden perks and a couple of weapons. Like, I guess there was like a hidden perk of marathon or sprint in a weapon that seemed to be removed. That just, it did not feel the same, did not play the same as the original. Although for the most part, the game was just like COD 4. But there were some subtle things that a lot of the original OG players did notice, that they did see, and you know, that did kind of turn them off a little bit, although that was really nitpicking, really minute, to be perfectly honest. So I don't consider that really a major problem. That's a tiny problem to start out with, and really that's from the gameplay perspective, that is really the only issue with the game. The rest of the problems I'm going to go over are mostly publisher and developer actions and decisions that really just turned the fan base and the community off. And the first one being the variety map pack was not included with the original release. You had to buy the map pack, and you know, a lot of people were like, okay, maybe $5, you know, probably be, you know, the price they go for, 10 at the most. They sold the map pack for $15. And it's like, really, $15? That makes absolutely no sense as to why it should cost $15 to get this map pack. I mean, if it didn't work with inflation. It just never worked, and a lot of people were perplexed as to why the map pack cost $15 when a lot of people thought, and I think this is probably a fair assessment, that it probably should have been part of the release. This should have been like a Game of the Year edition where you get all the DLC and stuff with your purchase, and they didn't have it in there. You had to buy it separately. So that kind of irked a lot of people the wrong way. The other part of it is they added supply drops in COD 4 a couple of months into the game. And this turned off a lot of the players who weren't playing IW and were playing MWR just on its own. And you could kind of understand why they added supply drops to Modern Warfare Remastered after a couple months, because they saw we're not getting as big of a player base in IW, and we're getting a bigger base than we expected in MWR. So let's put supply drops in MWR, and maybe we can make some money through that. And I'm sure they did a little bit, but I know a lot of the older players were really upset with this because they added weapons and supply drops for COD 4. Weapons that were never in the original game, that were now in the game, and again, it's another cash grab. So you ticked off a lot of people, you took their money, and you just made people angry, and you don't want to make your player base angry. I know there's a lot of people that say that everyone's going to yell at Activision no matter what with a Call of Duty because everyone's going to hate it no matter what, but when you make a decision like that, it really ticks people off. And another thing, another big decision, this is the last point I'm going to put up with on MWR, is originally the game was advertised as only being a packaged deal. You were only going to get the game if you bought IW, and you were only going to get it as a pre-order bonus, where you had to pay the $80 to get the game. And then in late June, they decided that they were going to release the game as a standalone title. And this made people flip their shit. Because they felt like that they were forced to buy Infinite Warfare to play MWR, that they felt like, you know, it should have been its own release from the beginning, and quite honestly, I can't blame them. Really, it just promoted this idea that MWR was only there to sell copies of Infinite Warfare, and to be honest, I totally agree with them on that spot, and honestly, it should have been its own release from the beginning. It honestly should. Maybe if you delayed it until January or February, fine, I get the point. But all the way wait until June to release it as its own? I mean, good grief, you're making it hard for me to even like give you the benefit of the doubt here, Activision, Infinity Ward. You're giving me a really difficult time to give you guys the benefit of the doubt here. But yeah, that's my problems with the MWR. And now one thing I want to like, this isn't necessarily a problem with the games, but again, it's another developer / publisher issue that really affected both games here, and that's the fact that we had 2 games this year in 1 year. We had 2 games, same release night, and you know, people complain about DLC splitting up the community. This split the community in half immediately. You know, people will complain, oh, whenever you buy DLC, it's the non-DLC players splitting away from the DLC players. At this point, now you have IW players, MWR players. And then within those games, then you start breaking down DLC players. And then you start breaking down, okay, these guys have this DLC and these guys don't. You know, DLCs 1 and 2 versus DLCs 3 and 4. And it just split the community and made it even worse. The matchmaking got worse. The servers got worse. And just overall, it's like, you know, the old complaint of DLC on steroids. And that is the biggest problem with this game, with this year, was that the community was split almost immediately. Going, I'm going to play MWR, IW, or I'm going to play MWR. So that is kind of that was one of the biggest problems with this year. And, you know, those were the problems with the game. So, but let's talk about the developer now. Let's talk about Infinity Ward's future in the Call of Duty series. And this is going to be really weird for a lot of people because Infinity Ward released COD 4 and MW2, two games that a lot of people consider to be the best Call of Duties in the series. And it really kind of sucks that we're at this point now where people are questioning whether Infinity Ward should be a COD developer, because this is the second year, this is their second cycle in a row where their release was just, their games were crap. I mean, you could say 3 if you really disliked MW3, although I will say this, I didn't like MW3, but at least it was a decent game. You know, it was an okay game. It wasn't my preference, but at least I didn't think it was garbage. COD Ghost and IW were garbage, and you only bought IW to get MWR. So, you know, that kind of poisoned the MWR well as well. And with 2 terrible development cycles for Infinity Ward, how can they still be a COD developer at this point? I'm sure they're going to be. In 3 years from now, we're probably going to have to deal with them again. But, I don't know. It just seems to me like IW really probably should be fired as a COD developer. And if they want to keep the 3-year cycle, Activision should bring in a new developer. I don't know if Ravensoft or if any other development company out there wants to take that on, because you are talking about a big project. But there should be a different developer, I believe, for the Call of Duty series to take Infinity Ward's place. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, guys, that's my time. I'm going to get out of here. If you guys stuck around for this 17-minute plus video, I really appreciate it. Appreciate it all. And we're going to try to get back into this whole thing, guys. I promise you, for those of you who've been around for a while, we are going to try to get back into this Call of Duty thing. We're going to make shorter videos than this, I promise, guys. But I wanted to take my time with this video in particular. But thank you guys so much for watching. My name's Lil Wooly. I'm out. Peace.